the soldiers bring back a demon still alive. Simply because they were so dangerous, the soldiers were forced to kill them to protect themselves. Usually those live demons were injured and always tangled up in nets. In those cases, the demon was killed slowly in front of the people of Citadel. Wings and ears cut off, hot coals put in its mouth and belly, and its body hung from a rope until dead. Excuse me. I ate right before coming here. My bad. Olivia had seen over a dozen demon corpses and one demon tortured. Meeting one now in the wild without any bars, nets, or chains between them almost caused Olivia to jump in the water. This one was small for a demon, but no less deadly. Its jaw could snap Olivia's arm like a twig if it was so inclined. Its body was the mythological wolf's and could grow taller than a man, but its rear legs were talons, perfect for gripping branches. Its tail was serpentine and feathered, designed for balancing in the air and on precarious treetops. The feathered wings were carefully folded against its back, but when they were spread, they would be massive. This particular demon was cream-colored, with brown markings across its fur, not unlike freckles that matched its brown wings. Olivia would find it cute if it weren't for the iron grip around her lungs. For an endless moment, they stared at each other. Olivia had used her left hand to gather the vine. They were out collecting a flower, which meant her right hand was free to get her knife. But if she reached for it, she was certain the demon would charge. This close, it would be on her long before she could do any damage. Its golden eyes went from her to the flower in her hand. Then it dove, spreading its wings just before it hit the water and flying around one of the trees before disappearing within the orange leaves. Olivia's hand went to her knife, but it was gone before she could draw. When she counted to 10 and it still hadn't come back, she released a gust of air and slumped against the tree trunk. Her hands trembled, her heart pounded, but most of all, her mind reeled. Why didn't it attack me? Demons go for the kill at every opportunity, so why didn't this one? Before she could ponder that further, the demon came back. This time she had her hand on her knife before it even landed, but she stopped when she saw what it carried in its jaws. Flowers. Green flowers. Green Prasina flowers. Just like the one in her hand. Olivia could have swallowed 100 bugs with how far her jaw dropped. It's been watching me collect flowers. It's been watching me collect flowers and did not attack. It's been watching me collect these specific flowers and deduced that I needed them. It then decided to get me some and remembered exactly where to find those exact same flowers. It's sentient. Fuck! A gentle woof brought her back to reality. Olivia blinked, closed her mouth, and inched closer to the demon. Peace offering or not, she was still cautious around the thing that could devour her in seconds. She was now close enough that she could count each and every one of its freckles. She could also see that this was a male and, as it was only as tall as her chest, was probably an adolescent. Good to know she wasn't the only young idiot in this tree. She carefully wrapped her fingers around the vines, about half a dozen in all. The demon's fur brushed against the underside of her hand, the softest thing she had ever felt. As soon as she had a firm grip on the plants, the demon let go, licking his chops as she pulled back. Now that she had her present, it seemed neither of them knew what to do. There were probably some rules for what should happen when you received a peace offering from your species' mortal enemy, but even if Olivia had been normal, she probably wouldn't know what they were. The demon slowly took one of the flowers in its mouth and ate it. She frowned, studying the plants. These weren't poisonous to humans, and in fact, the whole reason Franklin wanted them was because they could have medical qualities, capable of knocking out a fully grown man for a few hours. Why eat one now? Sharp whistling made her jump. One short, one long, one short, one long. Where are you? She whistled back, then made a shooey motion to the demon. He didn't need to be told twice. He jumped off the branch and flew away, disappearing into the forest. And there were no consequences of that whatsoever. None at all. So that was just a short little chapter from my science fiction novel, Citadel. If you didn't already know, it came out in June. It is my debut novel, and we will be signing some up front at the end of this little event. But I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to move it this way. I also wanted to open this up to any Q&A or discussion for anyone who has any questions about the book, about Cafe Latte, about the Black Wing novella series, or about anything else that comes to mind. We have like an hour. The world is our oyster.
I have a question.
What's up?
So what book were you reading when we came in?
Oh, yeah, this is a good one. So, rereading, actually.
Oh, okay.
Because my brain's in some sort of slump and I just cannot obtain new stuff. But this is called Wild Swans by, I'm probably mispronouncing it, Yong Shang. It's basically a family autobiography. She herself was like born in the 50s. Her mom in like the 20s, 30s. Her grandma at the turn of the century. And they're all from China, and the 20th century China was a dumpster fire. It was a mess. Like basically these three generations saw like the fall of the empire, the rise of the republic, Mao Zedong, Great March Forward, you know, the huge famine, all of it. And it's just beautifully written as we're tracing first her grandma, who was the concubine to a warlord, to her mother, who is basically a communist spy who was like smuggling detonators and stuff into her city, to herself, who grew up in this environment and then finally got out to London for an education in like the 70s or 80s. Beautifully written, 10 out of 10 would recommend. It's probably my favorite nonfiction book of all time. She's done a lot of other stuff on Chinese history, but this is probably her best work. Doggo!
Yep.
What type of doggo is it?
Aussie.
Oh, sweetie. Okay. I removed the dog from my site. I probably won't ask about it. Maybe. What's his name?
Lily.
Lily?
Lily.
Hi, sweetie. Okay.
Hi, pretty girl.
I love your earrings, by the way. They're really cute. What other questions, comments, concerns, beliefs, hopes, dreams? It can't just be me talking, guys. Yes, ma'am?
How long did it take you to write this?
Technically 14 years. So funny story. I first started like writing stories, complete stories, when I was like 11, 12 years old. And the first like full novel I wrote, I was 12 years old, 300 pages, I printed them out of pure stinking shit that I made my poor father read. Because here, in my defense, my mother is actually a international best-selling author of paranormal romance. If you guys have ever heard of Mary Janice Davidson, the Undead and Unwed series, Fred the Mermaid, that's her. Her generation of authors made the vampire sexy, which made Twilight thrive, so we're sorry. Yeah, she was kind of a part of that. But anyway, the fact that Twilight got 4 movies and she hasn't gotten any, whatever. Anyway, but you know, the thing is, my dad is like her #1 like beta reader, kind of amateur editor, that type of thing. So in my head, it was like, oh, mom writes a book, dad edits it, the book becomes a bestseller. So if I write a book and I make dad edit it, then my book would become a bestseller. And it technically worked, although this isn't a bestseller yet. But yeah, I had him read it. He read every single page. I know because he had a red pen and there were red marks on every single page. And then I was dumb, I didn't double side print it. It was just one-sided. So, you know, they had to go out and buy more paper because I burned through all their paper. And he wrote like, on the backs of the page, like 7 pages of notes of like, generally speaking, the compliment sandwich. What worked well, what needed improvement, all of it, everything needed improvement. And then like some final thoughts. And it was really encouraging to me because I knew like this is how he treats the adults in his life, so he's taking this really seriously. Add 14 years, endless rewrites and revisions, and that very manuscript turns into this, which combines basically Star Trek, ElfQuest, Warriors was kind of the original for one of the earlier drafts. It makes sense if there were like 4 factions and they were all based on different animals. It was like a whole thing. Rick Riordan was a huge major influence, as was George R. R. Martin for the deaths. So yeah, that's how long it took. And then like another few months to find a publisher. I lucked out on that one. And then another year or 2 to actually get it published. Because that's how long publishing takes. It takes forever. And no, I still haven't heard anything about a sequel yet. They're taking their sweet ass time with that. If they for some reason say no, I will self-publish a sequel, alright? We'll get it out there somehow. What other questions, comments, concerns? There's a unicorn on your shirt and I really like it.
Thank you.
I have a question.
What's up, ma'am?
So you also
It's kind of changing, but like, it's the same basic muscle, just applied in different ways. Like,
do you feel like one is translated over into the other, or like vice versa?
I mean, like, okay, so with Citadel, or with any long-form novel that's like, or the Blackwing series, like, you know, it's like you make it, you write it, and then it's done. Alright, I don't have to look at this thing for at least another year, or until they finally say, yes, please send us a sequel, so I'm gonna probably have to reread this just to remember where I left everything off, and make sure there's no continuity errors. But with Cafe Latte, because I'm uploading a video pretty much every single day, by the way, a new one comes out hopefully tomorrow, if not the day after, like, that is constant, ever-changing, ever-moving. Like, my writing style and my acting and everything else is constantly changing and improving, and I'm always trying new things. So, like, it loans a slightly greater flexibility, but, like, at the same time, it's so constant. Like, I constantly kind of have to be pushing it. So it's more, with Cafe Latte, it's more of an endurance test, more so than for a novel, which is already a bit of an endurance test, because once you write this, it's done, it's out there, I don't really have to think about it anymore. With Cafe Latte, I gotta think about, okay, well, like, 50 episodes ago, I name-dropped this person, and, like, said that they were, you know, this type of worker, and now I want to bring them back for whatever reason, so now I gotta make sure that, like, it all flows with that, whether or not the background's going to work or not. Like, there was that whole thing where I tried to green screen a little while ago. That sucked. And you know, being also more adaptable to recent events is pretty cool, whereas Citadel, this, you know, came out 3 months ago, but it was written a year before that, so it's already technically out of date. So it's also like, this is science fiction, Cafe Latte is urban fantasy. It's different. I have a lot more freedom with the world building with this one than I do with Cafe Latte. But also Cafe Latte has magic. This is theoretically bound by the laws of science. Ish. The science in science fiction is more of a suggestion than a rule. But you should still try to follow it for genre's sake. Yes, ma'am.
Between sci-fi and fantasy, which one would you say you like more?
Fantasy. Like, oh, I could never do fantasy, it's fantasy. Like, science fiction is fun, but like, first of all, you have to kind of know a few things about science. Like, I Googled and learned so much about, like, because this takes place on a different planet. So, like, how do other planets work? And, like, you know, there was, like, this whole thing where I was calculating the type of star and the distance it has from this planet, and that's how it affects the color of the plant life. Like, the trees are blue with orange leaves. That's not just because they're a species, that they like, specifically evolved that way because they're at a more distant, colder star, and that helps with the photosynthesis, the way their coloring is. But like, I've forgotten most of that, and like, the whole like biological creating the demons, would this actually work, how would it work, it's like, I slept through my science classes, okay? Like, yeah, I have a bachelor's in history and social justice, which are like, social sciences are great. Give me history, give me psychology, give me people, unpredictable and crazy, and yeah, it's great. But like, with science fiction, you got some constraints. With fantasy, there are none. Like, there's not even a whisper of what is or is not possible, what you can and cannot do. You can do whatever, you can have gods be real, you can have, you know, people shooting fire from their fingertips, or healing fire, or like, whatever. So I love that freedom and that level of control that I get to have. But like, the more you bring it into reality, the more confining it gets, which can be really fun creatively, because you're putting in new, different pressures on yourself, and that tends to be where creativity thrives. But also, I hate it. And I don't like it, and I want to just do whatever I like. So epic fantasy is probably my favorite. It's Blackwing novella series, Game of Thrones, you know, Lord of the Rings. That's, you have a complete blank canvas. You're creating the entire world from the ground up. Urban fantasy, of course, is you're doing it in our world. Or portal fantasy, where you're starting in one world and then going into another, like Narnia. Tends to be a sliding scale. So I'm surprised that I came out of the gates with science fiction. I so rarely write sci-fi. It's kind of weird that this was the first one I came out with, but it is what it is. Yes.
Why did you choose to make the main character nonverbal?
For two reasons. One is this was like year 12 or 13 that I was writing this book, and I was once again revising it. And at the time, I worked for an organization called Dungarvan. They help adults with physical and mental health needs to help achieve their life goals. Usually, a job coach variety. Sometimes just with things like grocery shopping or whatever. We try to help them be as independent as possible. So I was kind of a PCA plus job coach type of deal. And so I was being exposed to people with a lot of different diagnoses, and in addition to being in wheelchairs, cognitive disorders, and a bunch of other stuff, a couple of them also had autism. I also have a couple of cousins who are autistic, and dated a man who is autistic. A bit of a jerk, but that was something else entirely. So I had some exposure to it, and I thought, well, it'd be interesting to put her, because Olivia had already been a well-worn character at that point. She had pretty much always been the main character, except for the very first one. She was a side character there. But I brought her into the forefront so I knew who she was and her relationship with this town. And I thought, well, with autism, that would be more interesting. Like, it was just yet another layer of difference between her and them, another layer of otherness. And it's also going to be a bit another problem for her because she's kind of taken on the role of diplomat, first contact, which is seen when the wider world is like internally very empathetic, which is something that autistic people often struggle with. And then immediately my brain latched onto, what if we made her nonverbal just to cause her even more problems and to really bring home this theme of communication and differences and all that stuff. So it was kind of a combination of exposure to other people, making me comfortable enough to do that when I am holistic personally. And then also it just really worked well with both her character that I had created so far and the theme and the story and everything else. Like, it just fit. I could have obviously written it without that, but I don't think it would have been as cool, if we're being totally honest. Oh, and I'll get to you in just a sec. And by the way, the research that I did for Olivia for this also greatly influenced Nicole from Cafe Latte, because that's where I came across the whole autistic people were considered changelings in like Irish Celtic UK folklore and were treated like garbage because of it. And I thought, well, I can't really implement that here, but I'll tuck that piece of information away for later. And then when I was starting Cafe Latte, I was like, oh yeah, I should like confront that. And thus Nicole was born. You had a question.
How did you choose Olivia's mom's name?
Sarah?
I'm mispronouncing it.
Yeah, it's like, I can't even remember how I pronounce it half the time. I'd have to check the audiobook, which I don't read because I don't read audiobooks in one ear and out the other. It's biblical. There's like a Sarah, like a lot of the names, Michael, Gabriel. She was some dude's wife. She like had a son at like 90 years old or whatever, and it was like a miracle. I don't know. He like, when she and her husband went into town, he said that she had to pretend to be his sister for some reason that I never really got. It's been a while since I did biblical studies. But yeah, a lot of the names are biblical because like it's a dogmatic society, and the whole idea is like kind of descended from that. Like it's a whole thing. And then Augustus for like Roman emperor type of deal. Riley, I don't know why I chose Riley's name. It's just cool. And so same with Olivia, it just kind of fit. Ormus came from Diablo 2. If you guys
I
ever
was wondering about that.
Oh yeah, no, I grew up playing Diablo 2, and there's this NPC in the third act who you can purchase potions and stuff from. Very handy guy. Heals you when you come in. Very nice. And I guess I liked the O synchronism with him and his daughter. So yeah, I'm bad with names. I'm not a George R.R. Martin when it comes to names at all. They're usually like the last thing I think of, and then I'll change them like 6 times over the course of writing the damn story, and then change it one more time after writing it again, just for good measure. I can never settle on that's a whole thing. Anyway. Any other questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, hopes, dreams? Yes.
What was the process in choosing the cover art?
So the cover, it was surprisingly easy. I got contacted after I signed the contract with Blackstone Publishing. And we finally got to the point where we could talk about the cover art. Their artist contacted me through email. Said, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm in charge of your cover art. If there are any like major symbols or like character descriptions or like big colors that are like represented, like tell me about this story and like the big images that pop up. Which, by the way, Blackstone Publishing, really, really good with getting the author's opinion on cover art. Some publishers are assholes and they don't ask at all, and they completely ignore everything that the author has to say in terms of this, which is why you get like stuff where the cover art will have a person with brown hair and brown eyes, but the main character that it's supposed to be depicting is blonde and green-eyed. Like, that's how that happens. Not with Blackstone, thank God. Basically, I sent her like this long 3 big paragraph email saying like, well, here's like, they got the religion is like a big part of this town. They worship the many-faced God and like the masks and the statues and like all that stuff. And they usually carve it out from wood, which is on this alien planet is blue. And then also the Persina flower is really big in this story because it's about, it's like the bridging the gap between communication and all that stuff. And here's what the flower looks like, et cetera, et cetera. And apparently I did a good enough job that she had a draft out for me like that. It really got her artistic fire going. It was basically this, but the flowers were a darker green, like that book, Genteel Relativity. And it was a cool cover, but also I was like, those flowers need to be just a little bit lighter. Give me a little more white, a little more lily-ness. And then she came out with this. This is draft 2. Attempt 2. I know, like that woman deserves every penny that she gets, and probably several more that she gets for her work with Blackstone. So yeah, that's how I basically just pulled the most important symbols of the book and how they would have been depicted in this world and let her go to town. There are some authors who, like, I don't want to call them anal, but they're very protective of their covers, and understandably, but like if it's like just a little bit off, like they have to control every single detail about it. And I've never been about that. Like the whole reason I traditionally published this book instead of self-publishing it is because I wanted a team and to pool our expertise together to make the best possible product, and the cover was a part of that. Like I said multiple times, I'm not a graphic artist, I'm not a professional artist, like I'm just gonna throw stuff at the wall and hope you catch something. And they did, and it worked out well for everyone. Any other questions? Concerns, doggo? Alright, if that's everything, then we can probably move to the other room where you have that big pile of books. I brought my favorite pen.
Yay!
And I can start signing those as well as what you guys brought.
Yay!
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
So, she's okay again.